Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT How to Play video. Today our analyst will be diving into how to play hyper roll compositions. We'll be covering what hyper rolling is, how to play it, and the current meta hyper roll builds. With that said, let's get right into it. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright folks, let's get back into the video, and to start it off, let's talk about what hyper rolling is. Hyper rolling is a playstyle that seeks to 3-star one-cost champions for a mid-game power spike. It's meant to hit earlier in the game than other builds and ride that into the late game. By being stronger earlier on in the game, they punish other players that are low rolling, haven't gotten their compositions completely online yet, or that are playing greedy such as fast 8 builds. This allows the hyper rolling player to scale into the late game with a good economy and higher health to ride out until the end of the game. Generally, hyper roll builds will place in the top 4, though it is certainly possible to get a top 2 or even a game win. That tends to be dependent on the other players in the lobby and how strong they are. The downsides for hyper rolling mainly have to do with being outscaled later in the game. Once other players get their 4 and 5 cost units upgraded, they will begin outscaling your 1 cost champions. Another downside is you can easily bottom 4 if you roll down and don't hit the upgrades that you're looking for. We'll go over exact timings in the next section, but essentially if you miss out on getting your core champions 3-starred, you're gonna lose the game relatively fast. Hyper rolling can be a riskier playstyle as your early game and initial roll down will dictate how the rest of the game goes. But having the early game power spike when you do hit your 3-star champions can be a great way to secure a top 4 relatively consistently. So that concludes what hyper rolling is. Now let's talk about how to hyper roll. The basics for hyper rolling are quite simple and easy to follow. Don't level throughout the early game, hold on to relevant 1-cost champions for the particular build you're going to roll down for, and try to save up as much gold as you can. It is important to not level before you naturally hit level 5, as you want to have increased odds of finding 1-cost champions for as long as possible. On top of that, if you do level, you're spending extra gold that should be spent on picking up 1-cost champions for when you're rolling down. Level 5 will naturally occur on round 3-2, so your goal is to save gold and roll down on round 3-1. A decent rule of thumb to follow in regards to how much gold you should have is roughly around 50 gold by 3-1. If you have less, it just means you're going to have less of a chance of hitting 3-star champions. Ideally, you want at least 3 or 4 of each champion that you're going to roll down for by 3-1, otherwise you're going to have a lot of issues in getting your champions 3-starred on your first roll down. Prior to rolling down, you could have other units that aren't going to be a part of the composition in order to help win rounds or at least not lose too badly. You'll want to sell those champions on round 3-1 for the extra gold so you can get your core champions onto the board while you're rolling. On 3-1, there's not really much you need to worry about in regards to rolling other than trying to do so quickly and picking up specific champions you're looking for. Most hyper roll builds focus on 2 or 3 specific 1-cost champions, so you don't have to worry too much about lack of bench space. Try to roll down no lower than 10 gold, as you don't want to grief your economy too badly, though you can dip down lower if you're getting really close to hitting a 3-star champion. You can also stop rolling early if you 3-star one of your champions and the others are too far off to reasonably roll for. From this point, you're going to save up gold again, play whatever relevant champions you need for your composition, and wait to roll until round 4-1. On round 4-1, you have 2 choices. You can either roll down again to 3-star the remainder of your core champions, or you can slowly roll the excess gold each round to maintain a healthy economy and still have a chance at hitting upgrades. Don't do this if you're losing rounds badly or your health is below 50, as you want to try to stabilize by round 4-2 in order to safely transition into the late game. And that's really all there is to hyper rolling. The goal is to hit an early mid-game spike to stabilize and rebuild your economy to 50 gold, and there begin leveling and playing for the late game. Now let's go over the current meta compositions that utilize hyper rolling. First up is a returning build from 10.9, CANDYLAND. CANDYLAND is a build that uses Poppy with sorcerers as the core champions. Poppy and Twisted Fate are your 2 primary carries that you for sure want to 3-star in this build. Leona and Zoe are the other 2 champions you'll be looking for when you roll down, with Zoe taking priority over Leona, as Leona can be replaced by other vanguards later if needed. As mentioned, your goal is to hit Poppy 3 and Twisted Fate 3 and itemize both of them so that they can carry. Poppy is great with defensive items like Bramble Vest, Warmogs, Dragon's Claw, and Titan's Resolve, but can also use ability power items such as Death Cap and Ionic Spark. Twisted Fate only has 1 necessary item, and that's Morellonomicon, though any tier-based item is good on him, as well as other ability power items. After that, excess items will be used depending on what you have. Defensive items can go on your front line, and extra magic damage items can go on either Ahri, Syndra, Vel'Koz, or Xerath. Your goal after finding Poppy 3 and Twisted Fate 3 is to begin leveling and looking to get to level 8 so you can play 6 Sorcerer. There are variations that use 4 Vanguard or Mystic, but the most common variation right now is 6 Sorcerer with Poppy and Leona in the front line. Lux and Ahri are great to put in for 4 Sorcerers, as Lux provides good CC and Ahri is easier to 2-star as she's only a 2-cost champion and she also provides Star Guardian. From there, any Sorcerers are fine, but your endgame win condition will be Xerath 2. Without Xerath 2, you can still top 2, but it will depend on the strength of the other players. Overall, this composition is weak to builds that use Misfortune or Xayah to carry, as both can shred through your front line, but as long as you get Poppy 3 and Twisted Fate 3 with decent items, you're going to be in a good, strong position to top 4 with the build. Moving along, let's go over another hyper roll build, Shredder. Shredder is essentially Xayah 3 carry. Every other champion is there to support Xayah with their traits in some way. This build will end up being 3 Blade Master, 4 Celestial, 2 Chrono, and 2 Mana Reaver most of the time when you play the comp. Your list of champions at level 8 will usually end up being Xayah, Shen, Jarvan, Caitlyn, Rakan, Ashe, Kassadin, and either Fiora or Aurelia. Xayah is of course the most important champion, with Caitlyn and Jarvan being the other 2 units that you want to 3-star. You can also look to 3-star Fiora if you want to, but it's fine to replace her later with Aurelia. Shen 3 is viable, but don't go out of your way to roll gold for him. Pick him up as you're rolling if you can, but don't prioritize him over 1-cost champions. Items for Xayah remain mostly the same as they were in 10.9, with Last Whisper being the most essential. Infinity Edge is still great as it pairs well with Last Whisper, but Deathblade, after receiving buffs in 10.10, is also a strong option for Xayah. Defensive items are still advised, in particular Quicksilver or Trapclaw, as there is quite a bit of CC that can mess with Xayah. In general, positioning will matter much more often than defensive items, so going for full damage can work if you scout well. Overall, your goal for the build is to get a 3-star Xayah and Protector. Add in traits and champions as you level after you 3-star Xayah. The build is fantastic at shredding front lines, but it can be weak against strong AoE and magic damage if Xayah gets stalled for too long. Another important note of this composition is you really want to start off with Glove or Sword from the beginning carousel, as this build suffers greatly if you're not able to fully deck out your Xayah with items. And for the last hyper roll composition to talk about, we have ZIGGS carry. At the moment, this build doesn't have an official name, though Bomberman has been used. The goal of this build is to find ZIGGS 3 with specific items and transition into a standard Rebels composition in the late game. You'll roll to hit ZIGGS 3 and Malphite 3, and if you have the gold to do so, you can look for either Sona 3 or Yasuo 3. From there, the champions at level 8 are a standard 6 Rebels composition, with Gangplank being the most important late game unit to add in at level 8. The most important aspect of this composition is the items needed so that ZIGGS 3 can carry you through to the late game. Double Seraphs will make it so ZIGGS will constantly cast his ability, as his mana pool was reduced to 40 in patch 10.10. This turns him into a bombing machine. When paired with another Demolitionist, you can even permanently stun an enemy champion. So in order to make this composition work properly, you want to grab a tier off the beginning carousel and try to intentionally lose health in the first 3 PvP rounds. This will help put you in a position to grab another tier on the next carousel, and if you're lucky, you'll also get a tier drop on an early PvE round or Krugs. Rolling and hitting ZIGGS 3 is the most important aspect of this build to do well, but the tiers are paramount to the success of the composition. Overall, this build is insanely powerful when all the pieces fall into the right place, but it can be difficult to force if you don't have multiple tiers early on in the game. Because of that, it's much more volatile than the other hyper roll builds, as it can bottom 4 easily, but it's also much more likely to get a first place finish. Okay, that's a look at the current hyper roll compositions for patch 10.10. More may pop up over time, but for now, those are the 3 most common. Before we end the video, let's talk about a few galaxies. The best galaxy by far for hyper roll builds is the trade sector. Because this galaxy provides a free reroll every round, your chances of hitting a 1-cost 3-star is increased dramatically. Make sure you scout if you're trying to play a hyper roll build on this galaxy, as it's likely multiple other players will try to play one as well. Since we talked about the best galaxy for hyper roll builds, what about the worst? Well, that honor goes to the Nicoverse galaxy. Why this galaxy is so bad for hyper rolling is mainly due to how quickly other players can hit late game power spikes. As mentioned, it's easier for 1-cost champions to get outscaled, and that happens much quicker with 2 Nico's help, which allows other players to hit quicker 2-star, 4, and 5-cost champions. Having 2 Nico's help can work in your favor, but other players are still likely to level to 7 and 8 before you, and thus have much better odds at hitting their late game power spikes. We won't go over every galaxy, so let's just talk about one more, the Treasure Trove galaxy. This galaxy can be great for for hyper roll builds for a number of reasons. First is the amount of gold you're likely to get early game from PvE drops means your economy is much stronger than normal going into round 3-1. Second is having more components throughout the game makes finding specific items much easier, especially for a build like ZIGGS carry. Overall, more golden items is a good thing when hyper rolling. Alright folks, that's all we have for you for today. Hyper rolling has become a staple in the meta and it looks like it's not going anywhere in 1010, so we hope this video helped you get out there and hyper roll your way up the ladder. Let us know in the comments section below which hyper roll build is your favorite and which one you've had the most success with. As always, thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.